This question from Gary on Blue Sky. Is Lamine Yamal the most talented player that we have seen come out of La Masia since Lionel Messi, La Masia being the Barcelona Academy?
Yeah, the vaunted Barcelona Academy. Great question, Gaz, and I think one that we're going to have to split into several different bits. I think the reason this question is being asked in the first place, and the reason it's normal to ask it, is because of Lamine Yamal's age. Because really, we're not able to judge him as a player at 17 because he's not finished. But what is already clear, he is definitely the best at his age to come out of La Masia since Messi.
Since Messi.
And better than Messi at that age. Messi is nowhere near this good at 17.
Are you sure?
As the man, 100%. It's not even disputable. You look at what he's achieved. Undisputed pick for the first 11. Someone who's won a Super Cup, who's won a Euros, who could be winning La Liga and maybe even the Champions League this year. What is so amazing about Yamal is that you forget all the time. I forget all the time that he's 17. Because we've all seen young players with no fear. We've seen young players with exceptional talent. We've seen young players with pace that can dribble around a couple. As I've said time and time again, what separates Yamal from all those players is he passes the ball like a 30-year-old. And he has since he was 16. And that's the difference. It's not just the technique, it's the judgment that makes him a cut above pretty much anyone else. Now, of course, whether we're talking about whether he's going to be as good a player as Messi, that's a totally different question. And I think to expect him to be as good a player as Messi is unreasonable and unrealistic.
It's unhinged to ask of any teenager, are you going to be as good as that player who won 8 Ballon d'Ors across a 14-year period? That's unhinged. I'm sorry, you shouldn't be asking that question.
But we're not asking the teenager, we're asking you.
You cannot know. It's not possible because he could be, as Andy's just said, and I think you've made that argument really well, like he is at 17 better than Messi was 17. He played 50 games last season. He's 17 now. Like that's incredible. But it's still unhinged to say, and now will you be as good as the best player ever? Arguably, if we're Ronaldo, Messi, we can have that argument forever. We can have that argument with other names as well. But again, what makes Messi so incredible is that he was one of the 2 best players in the world for getting on for 2 decades. Like, that's what makes you the best in the world. It's not doing it one season, it's doing it that long. And it's literally impossible to know if Yamal can have that kind of career yet, because so much happens in a career. Injuries happen in a career. Managerial changes happen in a career. Club collapses happen in a career. So many things can change that's completely unforeseeable and really unreasonable to set the standard for a 17-year-old of immediately like, will you be as good as this forever? I think what Andy's doing feels much more like of a reasonable question to ask, which is like, where is he right now? Where is he like currently?
That's all we can ask really, isn't it? Because Messi's prime, which is a fair bit later than this, redefines what we expect from the best player in the world. Yeah. Like completely redefines. So because of that, if Yamal doesn't get to the point where he starts smacking in 30, 35 goals a season, and there's nothing really to suggest that he's that sort of player, then, maybe there's never that comparison in their prime years, which is a little unfair. And of course, going back to Gary's question, the most talented player. Because I think, you can look at other Barcelona products, and of course it's a very prolific academy. I think you look at someone like Gavi, for example, who, if you take Yamal out of the picture for a second, and I realise that's not the question, but just take him out of the picture for a second, what Gavi has already been able to achieve at only 20 is extraordinary. Barcelona and Spain missed him so much when he was injured. But, of course, he's a completely different sort of player. So I think we're in a new era of defining post-Messi and Ronaldo what the best player in the world is or could be or should be, or even what a perfect Barcelona product should be. I mean, we've talked about it recently, haven't we, with Nico Gonzalez going to Manchester City. You know, there's not this feeling anymore that players emerging from La Masia are identikit. Like, Yamal is not a player, I think, that would have been produced by La Masia 15 years ago. He's far more direct. He's way, way, way different. So, of course, there are certain tenets of what we expect from a player produced by the Barcelona Academy. But going back to Nico Gonzalez, for example, someone who's 6'2" and loves a challenge, or Gavi, someone who really enjoys the physical combat of football. And I'm not talking about physical endurance, because we can look at players from the past like Xavi and Iniesta, and they were players who could run all day. But players who actually relish physical confrontation, that's a little bit different.
I mean, because I think there's this instinct, I had the same thing when I was reading the question to go to like recent examples, someone like Gavi. But I mean, we can talk about more players who've had their entire career since Leo Messi graduated from La Masia. I think Sergio Busquets came out about 4 years after Messi did. And that's a pretty high bar for a career, and a completely different kind of footballer again to what we're talking about with Yamal. It's really hard to compare Sergio Busquets and the way he plays football to Yamal, because it's apples and oranges. It's something completely different.
Yeah.
But same thing really, Thiago Alcantara, who goes on and wins the Champions League with Barcelona and with Bayern Munich. So there are some extraordinary footballers.
And he's a great example of how injury can massively affect a career as well, as you were saying at the beginning.
This is a great example of a question that will keep us here all day, but we haven't got that time. We'll leave it to Ask OTC listeners to debate that one. But the answer from you, certainly, Andy, and I think you're back in this.
Yeah, and I realised that I came in so strongly. I definitely didn't mean to like attack the question from Greg. I think it's a fascinating question. It's just that like that idea that we can like I'm just sort of trying to stick up for Yamal, frankly, because I think like being told on like 17 years old, like having the expectation set at, are you Leo Messi, is so
unhinged
wild.
Was your word. Unhinged. That's the word that we'll use for that one. This question, though, from Matt on YouTube. Thierry Henry made the bold statement that Raphinha is the very early favourite for the Ballon d'Or. How has he taken himself from a relegation battle with Leeds United to arguably the world's best?
I think it's not that massive a statement to say he's an early favourite for the Ballon d'Or.
I think he's the lead scorer in the Champions League at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he should be. 27 goals this season, and the best player, if not the best team in Europe, the best team in Europe behind Liverpool this season. Certainly the most attractive team in Europe behind Liverpool this season. And he's having a career-defining season. So I think if Raphinha's not in the mix, he certainly should be. I think because of where he's come from, there's definitely a feeling that he's not a typical Ballon d'Or winner. Because, as Matt sort of says in the question, I think we had an idea of what and who he was before he turned up at Barcelona. And that's the interesting thing, that in this season, he's completely debunked that. We knew he was a good player already, but he's ascended to a completely different level and he's performing a completely different role. And I'm not really talking about tactically, but in terms of his leadership. Now, we know Raphinha's apart from a lot of the players he plays with because he's not an academy product, because he had to play a lot of street football, because he came up through Guimarães before he got to Sporting, and then went to Rennes before he ended up at Leeds and has ended up at Barcelona.
And is that what you mean by not a typical Ballon d'Or winner then?
Absolutely. It's a very, very atypical path to becoming the best player at one of the best teams in the world. And I think it speaks absolutely for him. But it also means he really deserves to be in this conversation. Now, I think in terms of what he's been able to do as a leader this season, and the leadership has been really important with Barcelona because they are a young team. I think from someone from outside, from a completely different background, as we say, than a lot of the players that surround him, I think that actually helps him be a leader because he has had to fight tooth and nail for everything he's been an exemplary captain when he has been captain this season. But really, I guess the question is kind of prodding about the amount of goals that he's been able to score this season. And that, I guess, if we talk about the tactical side of it, Hansi Flick has definitely helped because he wants to play more offensive football. The way that Raphinha has applied himself has really helped. And because of Barcelona's financial situation, and let's be honest, especially with the academy talent they've got, they never should have bought him. It was a ridiculous vanity purchase, and yet he's turned into something completely different to what they thought they were getting. And it has worked out simply because he has made it work out. Because since about 6 months in, they've wanted to sell him because they realised they shouldn't have bought him because they're in massive financial trouble. And the fee they paid for him was absolutely humongous for an area of the team where they weren't desperately short in the first place. But because he has basically said in a very non-aggressive way that I came to Barcelona because I wanted to play for Barcelona and you ain't going to kick me to the curb, and that is the way it is. And he's dug in just like he's dug in throughout his career. But what has happened with Hansi Flick, because it's a really attacking team, because Raphinha's in brilliant form and because he's applying himself so well, I think if you look at Alejandro Balde on the left-hand side, going out wide, staying out wide, being a very attacking fullback and creating a bit of space inside for Raphinha, that's definitely helped him to get into more central positions to score goals. The other thing, and we talked about in the previous question, Lamine Yamal, who pulls the team the other way because he has a very wide starting position. That pulls the whole of the team over. And both of these things give Raphinha the ability to get into these central positions. So not only has he been a good finisher from an inside left position a lot of times this season, and he's had the freedom to pop up on the right as well, he scored more headers than you would expect as well, which is him being able to attack those central areas.
I think there's to pick up the question, I think there's another element to it, which is just, it's kind of, I suppose it's not another element, but it's the same bigger discussion that you're touching on there, which is just context. Context matters so much to a footballer. The context that you're put in as a footballer, you are able to express different things in a different team, in a different setup. And I think with Raphinha, you could even say there's value that he's been able to bring to that Barcelona side off the ball as well. When you've got someone like Lewandowski leading the line who's not going to necessarily harry defenders as much.
He just can't anymore.
Yeah. You get a whole different kind of value off him that I think is also part of why he ends up deserving all the praise he gets, I guess.
Although we know from last year that whoever gets a Ballon d'Or, it will be controversial. There'll be people who say, well, that person deserved it more, etc. So hold that fire, Matt, on YouTube, and you make the absolute correct point, which is to say, according to Thierry Henry, is the very early favourite for the Ballon d'Or. Watch this space. This question from Peter on Instagram. After Freiburg was mentioned a couple of weeks ago as a team that has gone under the radar this season, what about Mainz? Could they go better than even what Jürgen Klopp managed with them and achieve Champions League football for the first time ever?
Yeah, they could. There's no doubt about it. They've been brilliant. Bo Henriksen, the coach, has done a fantastic job since he's gone in there. And we'll talk about the strengths of Mainz in a minute, but the reasons, apart from them being excellent, that they could make the Champions League, it's kind of a Leicester-esque perfect storm where they are at the moment, because you have Leipzig well below par, you have Dortmund way, way below par, you have Stuttgart who've lost a couple of important players and had to get used to playing Champions League football this season. So that's really opened up the top four for someone to really grab it by the throat. Now, of course, early on in the season, that was Eintracht Frankfurt. If you're looking for your next part of the perfect storm, they lost Marmouche in January, which is an absolutely irreplaceable loss. But I think if you look at Henriksen's coaching, and he was brought in, of course, for a completely different job, a little bit like Eric Wyatt at Brest, I suppose. And the fact that he's managed to take it onto the next level, part of that is taking the opportunity that exists. But I think part of that is you look at his authenticity as a coach. What he's managed to get out of his best players is absolutely extraordinary. And, we talked about Stuttgart losing players. They lost a big player. They lost Sepp Vandenberg to Brentford at the start of the season, and he was absolutely huge for Mainz. So they've managed to deal with that quite well. But I think a big part of it is the two best players who are surfing the absolute crest of a wave. So Jonathan Burkhardt, who's been mooted as a Marmouche replacement, by the way, for Eintracht Frankfurt at some point. The captain now, scoring well, brilliant movement. He's just a terrific forward who I think if Eintracht Frankfurt don't get him in the very near future, they will have missed their chance because big clubs will want Burkhardt. But, they had a bit of the season where they were missing him with injury, and they managed to surf that out relatively well. But the key player really is Nadim Amiri, who is just an enormously talented midfielder who's great at Bayer Leverkusen. He's played at a very high level before. The captain now of Mainz. And, he really lost his way towards the end at Leverkusen. He went on a loan spell to Italy, to Genoa, that didn't really work out for him. And he's gradually found his way at Mainz. He's settled off the pitch as well. He's talked about that, and that's really helped. And now his sort of form is putting him back in the Germany squad. He's that good. You can't keep him out of the Germany squad because he has been absolutely sensational. Funnily enough, he's not really been thinking about it. I mean, he's been out of the Germany squad for 4 or 5 years, and now he's sort of come to a point where he wasn't considered a contender anymore. It's allowed him the freedom to play his best, and Henriksen's coaching has allowed him the freedom to play his best, that he's got himself back into the spot. But look, you look at them going away to, they started last Bundesliga weekend winning 3-1 at Borussia Mönchengladbach. And because there's no pressure on them, they just feel that they can go and they can win any game. They're a very, very convincing unit with good individuals. I think they'll make it.
It feels like Henriksen's great asset at the moment. I don't want to just bring it back to vibes, but it does feel like he's got really good
vibes,
energy at the moment for that team. I was reading an interview with him on Bundesliga.com after seeing this question. I was just catching up on stuff, and I really enjoyed the way he framed this question about their chances and saying, if you look at the clubs around us, their budgets, their players, the quality they have, it should be impossible. I've tried many things in football, though, which shouldn't be achievable, and I don't care.
That's the right answer. Talking of which, in terms of answers, Andy's mentioned a couple of times now that Dortmund are playing below par, way below par. Nicky, Dan on YouTube asked, after progressing to the Champions League quarterfinals, and here's the dilemma, after progressing to the Champions League quarterfinals, what has made Borussia Dortmund's form in Europe so much better than their league form over the past 2 seasons?
Yeah, I don't want to just throw straight back to Andy after he did all the big on that Mainz, but I know you have stronger feelings on this one possibly than I do, Andy, so I might do exactly that because I think you have more of a...
Well, look, I think the answer to this is quite simple, really. The Champions League is a cup competition and you don't need to have the best team to win it. I think that's something that we can't drift too far from. Now, I think that the key to this is that Dortmund have some they have some major problems, but they also have some absolutely outstanding individuals. And we saw that in their victory away at Lille this week. I think you look at the way that Maxi Bayer stepped up and scored the winning goal. I thought Karim Adeyemi was very, very good in this game as well. And they managed to, and we've talked about it with Real Madrid in the main show, actually. The fact that you always have this feeling about Real Madrid. Are they really the best team in it? Are they really the best team in this match that we're watching them play at the moment? But actually being able to hang on, and Dortmund started that game at Lille terribly. The goal they gave away was awful in the first 5-6 minutes of the game. And yet they managed to stabilise, stay in the game, and their moments of quality win them the game. And it's a little bit like, you were talking in the main show, Nicky, about how Atletico should have got knocked out by Inter, which is absolutely right last season. Dortmund should have got knocked out by Atletico in the next round. Dortmund, they got absolutely mullered in Madrid. And fortunately for them, thanks to a late Sebastian Haller goal, they only go back with a 1-goal deficit to the second leg. And the second leg, when they play Atletico, I'm still trying to make sense of that. And it was a year ago. You know, Dortmund get themselves in front in the tie. They lose the thread completely when Atletico get back into it, and then Dortmund have to win the tie all over again. So they're almost out of it in the first game, and then they manage to win it a couple of times. And then you get to the semi-final against PSG, where PSG have enough chances to win an entire Champions League season over the 2 games, never mind 2 individual games, and they don't score over those 2 good games. And so I think, you know, people can look at the result on the paper and say, oh yeah, Dortmund defended really well, didn't they? Because they kept 2 clean sheets, which could not be further from the truth. But I think these high-end individuals, and funnily enough, the thing that has made them worse in the league, that inconsistency of transfer policy, the clumsiness of the transfer policy, too many people in the boardroom having a big voice and a big say, has almost made them better equipped to win individual games at this high level, because Guirassy can win you the game, Adeyemi can win you the game, Bayer can win you the game, Gittins can win you the game, Brandt can win you the game. So many of them. So a lot of the stuff that you will get found out for over a 34-game season, you can just about get away with in the Champions League. Like I said, though, I don't think they're getting any further than Barcelona.
But in some ways, this week's game was kind of the perfect summary of the answer about it being a cup and not a league, and things just happened because, yeah, they were better than Lille. They deserved to go through, but also the penalty was never a penalty, and they were losing at that point. If it wasn't a penalty, then maybe they don't go through at all.
Yeah, this is Ask OTC. We are OTC. So on this question, Nicky, you can't pass it on.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you can't, particularly as it's got your name on it. Andy on Discord asks, with Filippo Inzaghi, remember him? The other Inzaghi, some people might say.
No, he's the Inzaghi. He's not the other Inzaghi.
Forgive me. Let me start again then. With Filippo Inzaghi seemingly on a promotion charge with Pisa, if promoted, how does Nicky think they'll fare?
Hard to say, and I think I have to say, first of all, without wanting to burst the bubble, the promotion charge has been a bit more meandering recently. They've lost their last 2 games against Sassuolo, who are ahead of them in first place, and Spezia, who are right behind them in third. So they are still second for now, and top 2 is automatic promotion. After that is playoffs. But I don't want to jinx poor Pippo, Super Pippo, who lots of us have fond memories of as a player. Exactly as everyone immediately picks up, Pippo Inzaghi was, of these 2 brothers, far and away the more successful footballer, won Champions Leagues for Milan, scored hundreds of goals. Simone Inzaghi was also a top flight striker and probably deserves a bit more credit for his playing career. But when your brother is Pippo, that's the way it reflects. And as a manager, it's been flipped around. And Simone is, as we were talking about on the main show, in my opinion, one of the best managers in all of Europe. And Pippo isn't, but he's doing a good job right now at Pisa. And I think what's fascinating with Pippo Inzaghi is how he's not let go of this idea of being a football manager. I remember interviewing him when he was in charge at Venezia. He dropped down from coaching Milan, he dropped down to manage Venezia in the 3rd tier at the time. And I had a chance to it was a very odd trip. It was a time when Joe Tacopina was in charge of the club, and I had a lot of access, but we were taking a boat back from the game, and people jumped in with us and was very chatty and friendly, but was immediately obsessing about all the scores from all the different divisions. I mean, he's football mad. He's properly, and as you might expect for someone who's had his career, but lots of people in football, I think, aren't as in the nerdy, detailed way interested in absolutely everything that's going on everywhere in football. And I think it was a really interesting interview he gave earlier this year, and he was talking about his path as a manager and saying, well, look, in my opinion, my brother is one of the best in the world, basically, and I'm not there. But also saying, I have almost 350 games as a professional coach now, and you learn things along the way, and I go and chat to my brother and I learn things from him. And so he's not someone who's just assumed because he's a former footballer and he was really good, he'll have it all down, and he's gone out and he's tried to learn things. So he's a really easy guy to root for, Pippo Inzaghi, and I hope he does well. To answer the actual question, I don't even know if they're going to get promoted. They let go of someone pretty significant for them, Lorenzo Luca, who's having a great season up at in Serie A now on loan at Udinese. But
the penalty king.
Yeah. But they have had some players who've done well this season under Inzaghi, Matteo Tramoni, the strikers. I think he hasn't quite got double figures yet, but he's having a bit of a breakthrough season in his mid-20s after having some slow recovery from a cruciate ligament injury. And yeah, there's lots of positive noise around the club. We might be jumping the gun to say how will they do in Serie A because they've got to get there first. But Pippo is doing his thing.
Nicky, with that in mind, if I was Andy on Discord, and I am Andy, and I do have a Discord account.
You're not this Andy.
I'm not this Andy on Discord.
Goodness for that.
No. I would never abuse my position of power in such a way. What I would ask to you is, with Sassuolo not quite looking home and hosed, but looking very, very well placed to get promoted, how will Fabio Grosso go in the top flight?
Oh, good question. I mean, I think when it comes to Sassuolo, they are an extremely well-resourced football club for being in Serie B. They're a club who have the backing of Mappé, which is a massive international business, and in some ways you can call it artificial. Say they're a club that had a bunch of money more than the local population and supporter base in Sassuolo would necessarily you'd expect them to have, but they have been essentially a club designed and built to survive in Serie A, and so I would expect that if Grosso brings them back up, which looks likely, they will spend to make sure they belong in the top flight. And the same might go for Pisa, by the way, who have also got, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but they've got a patron nowadays who has deeper pockets than you might imagine for a Serie B team. So these clubs, how they would do in the top flight depends a bit on how much the owners are willing to spend. But in Sassuolo's case, I would feel very confident that project wants to be in the top flight. They got their own stadium to be in the top flight. That is where they intend to be. So I think Grosso has every reason to think he'd do well if he came up with them, and clearly is doing well with them, because yes, they're not up yet, but they are. I haven't got the table in front of me, but I think it's about 10 points ahead of Pisa now.
Don't go anywhere. We've got another question that has got your name on it. But Andy, feel free to join in as well. This is my point of tune on Blue Sky's question. After 4 wins from their last 5 and sitting 5th in the table, are Bologna back as serious contenders for Champions League qualifications?
Yeah, 100% they are. They're playing really well under Vincenzo Italiano, I think.
Compared to last season?
I think what happened at the start of the season was completely predictable when you look at what happened in the summer, when you have your manager, Thiago Motta, who was absolutely the author of this incredible run to 5th in the table, to a Champions League spot with this very specific brand of football that was all his. He leaves, and Joshua Zirkzee, who's your best forward, leaves, and you lose Riccardo Calafiori to Arsenal, and you've got Lewis Ferguson carrying an injury he suffered during the second half of that season. There's all these pieces that have been taken away, and so it was somewhat predictable for poor Vincenzo Italiano, who's the manager who has deserved this opportunity and this break and a chance to coach a bigger team after doing so well at Fiorentina, that he walks into a club that's just had all of these things taken away, and there are teething problems. There's problems getting this whole project started again, because you've had everything that made the club so successful last season taken away. And I think what you've seen in the second half of the season is Italiano make his mark on the team. They play in a slightly less adventurous way than they did under Thiago Motta, but they've become, as his Fiorentina sides were, extremely robust, extremely tactically intelligent, and a team that makes the most of the assets they do have. And I think when we talk about the players who thrived under Motta, who had real breakthroughs under Motta, who didn't leave, Riccardo Orsolini is maybe the biggest one who didn't go, other than, again, Ferguson with injury. And Orsolini has been brilliant in recent weeks. He's been scoring goals and is a big part of why they're back in the conversation. But yeah, they beat Milan a couple of weeks ago. They're winning games. The fight for that last Champions League spot is certainly open with how Juventus are wobbling, and Bologna are not the only team in that conversation. I think it's looking unlikely, not guaranteed, but unlikely that Italy will get the fifth Champions League spot now. So you are looking at one spot, probably fourth spot between several teams, because in my expectations, Inter, Napoli and Atalanta will all qualify. So that leaves one spot between Juventus, Bologna, Lazio,
Roma a push?
Maybe Roma with the way they're coming on as well. Milan obviously want to be part of the conversation, but their results haven't been good, so it's a very competitive fight. Fiorentina even for that last spot. But do I think Bologna are in the conversation? Yeah, I think they're playing well enough.
It's now time for that Game of the Week, brought to you by FotMob. Each week, our experts recommend a game for you to watch at the weekend. And just as importantly, they also suggest the food we should be having with it, which is great because Nicky's here and she's been all around the world and she's brought us some food back, but we haven't seen any of it yet. So your Game of the Week first, Nicky.
Well, I feel like I'm just copying Lars Sivertsen now, but I would have picked this game even if he didn't pick the Juventus-Atalanta game last round. It's Atalanta against Inter on Sunday night. I think even though it's Atalanta 2 weeks in a row, they deserve it. They are 3 points behind Inter. That title race is wide open, as is the top four race in Italy. And they of course, have Napoli in between them, who'll be playing earlier in the weekend, but absolutely title implications. Absolutely, Atalanta will be feeling confident after having that great result against Juventus. But having said that, Atalanta have had some great results away from home recently. They've also had some really disappointing draws at home against Cagliari and against Venezia. So they need to bring that away form back with them to Bergamo.
But as Nicky says, they deserve it. But hold your thoughts, Andy, because I'm going to ask you in a moment. But first, Nicky, what are we going to eat?
Well, I was going to give you a classic Bergamese dish, casoncelli alla bergamasca, which is a filled pasta, in some ways just a different shape, but similar idea to tortellini, and stuffed with old peasant food. So it was always like the old offcuts of meat, but nowadays it's normally a bit of sausage and a bit of mortadella. But you wanted my international travel dish, so instead of that, you're getting Mickey Mouse eggs from Disney Tokyo.
Properly explain this, right?
So I've just been around all over literally all around the world, because I went to Japan and then on to New Zealand and then flew back the other way around. So I've eaten a lot of different things, including some pretty decent stadium food at FC Tokyo, by the way. I did see a football game in Tokyo and the stadium food was not bad. But the bit that I think I always have to show everyone first is at Disney Tokyo, they have these eggs.
Boiled eggs,
soft boiled eggs. You get a lovely plate of food for a theme park, frankly, for about £8 with some rice and some stew and some prawn tempura, and you get a half a soft boiled egg, except when you cut the egg is served as a half egg, it's open, and when you look at it, the yolk is perfectly shaped as a Mickey Mouse head silhouette. So the yolk is
with ears,
golden with the ears. And we had a really long discussion at the theme park about how on earth they did that. And
how could you eat it, Mickey?
It was delicious, actually. It was really good. A Japanese... Sorry if this is going to sound really like, I don't know, bland thing to say about international food, because there's so much more delicious food in Japan, but they do eggs really well. Every egg I had in Japan was really well cooked. So yeah, Japanese eggs was my unexpected discovery.
So we could have gone for the Italian, but we're going to be eating
Mickey Mouse eggs.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's coming up to Easter, I suppose. Andy, what's your game of the week?
Well, it was going to take something big for me to turn my back on Atletico versus Barcelona, but turn my back on it I have. I've gone for Saturday, 5:30 UK time, Leipzig versus Dortmund. And this is big because, as we've said across the two shows this week, these are two teams who should be doing much better. Their natural spot is in the Champions League. And at the moment, it looks like not only one of them might miss it, but maybe even both of them. You've got two coaches that are under pressure. Marco Rosa probably hanging on because there's not really an alternative at this point. You know, he's aware of how things are there, but they're only on sixth place. They're 3 points adrift of the Champions League places, but they're just not winning at the moment. They've not won in 4 in the Bundesliga, Leipzig. They are at home here. playing a Dortmund team who put a lot into the Champions League this week, but Dortmund team who, despite having a very poor season in the Bundesliga in 10th place, they could close the gap to Leipzig to 2 if they were to go and win this game. I'm not sure I'd bet everything I've got on that, because Dortmund were awful against Augsburg last week. They had 72% possession, never looked like scoring. So a lot of pressure on both of these big clubs. And we talked about Mainz earlier having the opportunity to go for the Champions League, mainly due to these two. So let's see if they can pick up and get the bare minimum, because for both of these teams, top 4 is the bare minimum this season. And as I said, at least one of them is likely to miss it. Now, of course, you're expecting me to go for sausages, sauerkraut, all that sort of stuff. You can enjoy that, of course. I would never turn you away from halftime currywurst, even if this is at Leipzig Stadium. This is the Red Bull Arena, so it's not in Nordrhein-Westphalia, which, as we know, has the monopoly on the greatest halftime currywurst in the Bundesliga. So I'm going to direct you to Archie Rinter, our good friend. If he was here, he would do the same thing. Leipzig has a couple of really great kebab spots. So go and get yourself a chicken kebab and come on, make mum happy. Get some salad as well.
Not sure about the salad. You can follow those matches, by the way. Andy's pick, RB Leipzig versus Borussia Dortmund, as he says, that's Saturday at 5:30 for us. And also Nicky's pick, Atalanta versus Inter, which is Sunday at 7:45. You can follow those matches and many more from across Europe and beyond with FotMob. FotMob is the best place to check the latest scores and in-depth stats from all the football on the continent. Download the free FotMob app right now and get all the latest analysis at your fingertips in time for the weekend. And thank you for listening to Ask OTC. If you'd like to ask a question, contact us at any time at Radio Dotun, at Andy Brassel, at Nicky Bandini, or at OTC Pod. And you can email us, otc@footballramble.com.